Allison. I wanted to talk about how not to pivot in a crisis, and of course, how to think about going about a pivot if you need to. Bit of context, we launched the Key Person of Influence program about a decade ago in the middle of the GFC in London to be able to help business owners make the most out of chaotic times. Now about 3,000 businesses plus around the world use that methodology as a performance tool in their business. And so I want to draw from what we're seeing in our community. We've got a hyperactive community around the world sharing best practices right now in terms of what's working and what's not. And I just want to show you what I'm seeing around the idea of the pivot. First of all, you can be forgiven if you've been caught a little bit flat-footed. You can see up on the screen now is the current economic drop of the S&P 500 versus historical. This has been a rapid deterioration. One of the big mistakes that I'm seeing is people aren't going back to basics. They think their business is over. They've had clients cancel and they are understandably freaking out. So one of the mistakes is not going back to basics. The basics in building any business. Business is just a vehicle for delivering an outcome to a customer. And in our programs, we take everyone back to the very start and go, what is the fundamental point of what we call maximum value that you can deliver, right? There's no point building something around something that isn't particularly valuable. And so there are three key elements that surround that maximum value triangle, if you will. So the first is the people, and importantly, what are the problems that they have? If you know me, you hear me talk about it a lot. The only reason people buy is to solve a problem. There's got to be a headache or a pebble in their shoe or something that's going wrong. So you can appreciate that problems have gone up substantially for a lot of people in a lot of areas. However, some things that used to be considered problems now seem quite insignificant. I'm going to give you some examples of that as we go. And that is fundamentally that increase in some problems and that decrease in the perception of others is one of the reasons why some people feel like their businesses are suddenly broken. So we're going to talk about that. That's the first bit, your people. You might also think of that as your niche, your target market, your ideal customer. The next is your product or service. Clearly, you're going to package a product or a service. It's going to have a brochure, it's going to have an offer form, it's going to have pricing, it's going to articulate exactly what people are going to get and when, and that's going to go here. And of course, that is what people buy to solve the problem. And then there is your pitch. What we like to call it is your promise. Right? What is the promise that you are putting out into the market? And again, if you know our stuff, you know we're big on promising a destination, actually taking someone somewhere, not physically, but we're in the business of producing key people of influence. That's where we take people to the point where they're showing up in their industry as highly valued, highly paid, able to attract the needle in the haystack. There's an outcome there. So all these three things need to come together. Now, the problem is that for a lot of businesses, that max value has shifted. So for example, training is one of the areas that I've seen that's gone out the window. If you imagine a war analogy, right? I was sitting down with a group of high net worth business owners and I said, have any of you ever seen this before? Many of them were a lot more senior than me. All of them said, no, this is freaking weird, except one who was running a security company in Iraq at the fall of the regime, when Saddam's big statue, that's what this is, fell over. He was there. He's like, that was weird. So the closest analogy to this that I've heard is a wartime analogy. Now, if you're producing buses in World War II and you don't pivot to tanks, well, you're going to be left flat-footed because all of a sudden buses aren't as important anymore in the scheme of the context. So here's what I'm seeing. A lot of businesses are holding on to the max value they had in peacetime, in the good times. But we're not in the good times. We're in a crisis where everybody's perception of value shifts. And I'm seeing that businesses that have the capability, that have the experience, that have the credibility to solve incredibly meaningful problems. In fact, they're sitting on businesses that have gone up in value 10 times in terms of the problems that they could solve. But because they haven't gone back to scratch to examine who could I possibly offer maximum value for, what's the product that they would need, and how do I need to adjust my pitch, they're feeling like they're out of business and they're not pivoting fast enough. So let me give you an example. A good buddy of mine runs a technology company, successful technology company, multiple millions in revenue, successful team, really great lifestyle business. Now, when this happened, all of a sudden he started getting a flood of inbound opportunity for people that corporates, organizations that needed to suddenly get thousands and thousands of their workers working from home in a secure encrypted environment, sharing mission critical IP that couldn't just go across a normal Zoom link or something like that. So as a result, went to the drawing board, packaged up a product. He already had all the technology, all the expertise, the capability and the capacity to deliver it, but it just needed a bit of a rework. And then of course, trained his team on how to pitch it. And all of a sudden, within the space of 2 days, had a product that he could charge out at a couple of $1,000s an hour to be able to implement that. Really rapid pivot, but you can see how there was a new niche. He wasn't normally attracting people for that particular issue that had that particular problem. It wasn't a thing. Now it is. He wrapped a package around it, some pricing around it, got the pitch sorted. Yep, we can get you up and running in a safe, secure, encrypted environment within the space of about 36 hours, and boom. But that's a good example of how that works. Some of the mistakes I'm seeing is that instead of people pivoting around the newly shaped max value, what they're doing is that they're trying to drop their prices, hoping that's going to work. That is just a fundamentally terrible idea. Dropping prices is a race to the bottom, but more importantly, if the nature of the problem, if the nature of the max value is shifted, people don't want it, dropping the prices isn't going to make people want it more. If you do get a few sales at a much lower price to try and just get those very last stragglers that still may perceive some value in what you used to do in peacetime, you're still going to put yourself in a context where you can struggle. And here's the problem with putting yourself in that kind of struggle, that scarcity, that sort of survival mindset. There's not a lot of upside in a survival mindset. There's not enough upside in sort of playing it safe, hunkering down and kind of waiting to see what happens. So my recommendation is, instead of dropping your prices, you sit down, go back to basics. I'll give you an example. So we do a lot of work, if you can still hear me, with our clients in KPI, and going back to canvases, going what is your ideal customer? What are the key problems that they're experiencing? What are the mistakes they're making now that are keeping them stuck? How do you approach solving that problem, and what's the outcome? What's the destination we call the prize or the promise? And a lot of people that have been in business for 5 years, 10 years, they kind of feel that stuff's going back to basics too much, and they're not stopping, they're not thinking about what their options are. So my recommendation is stop, think, options. What are your options? When you're thinking about people, look at the ASX. What's doing well, what's doing badly, and what's doing badly but still won't fail. That should give you some inference as to how the max value has shifted for some other industries. Set up some Google alerts in your industry around what is the media saying about that particular industry. Are they being affected? How are they being affected? That can give you some incredible data on how you might be able to pivot your people, your product, or your pitch. So my feedback and my suggestion, if you are in a business or an industry that was doing well and all of a sudden you've just had all of this business cancel, please don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It is highly likely that you have incredible value, that you have incredible expertise, you have capability, and you have capacity to be able to solve some incredible, meaningful problems right now. Just because the market has shifted doesn't, and your current business, your current focus, your current product or service, your current pitch might not be valuable, but that doesn't mean that you're not valuable. It shouldn't take you very long to pivot around your people, around your product, and around your pitch. And of course, if you need help, feel free to reach out. We are here to help. This is another of the Reinvention series. We're running a series of lives. We're running a series of sessions to be able to help business owners recalibrate, reset their value proposition so they can reinvent themselves, whether they think they're going out of business, whether they're going to struggle through this to get to the other side to take advantage of the opportunity, or whether they're thriving but they want to make the most of this time so they can position themselves most effectively to be able to serve and to be able to help. So stay tuned for more. We've also put together what we call a crisis reinvention team. It's a coalition of our clients that are authors, speakers, experts around the world in key areas. Again, in this series of lives, you'll see them, or you can just go to dent.global/reinvent and you'll see a whole calendar of everything that we've got coming up. Thanks for tuning in. I hope that's useful. Hit me up in the comments below. All you got to do to navigate this is 3 things. Be brave. Have fun. Let's go make a dent in the universe.